Cal, I want to thank you for sitting down with me to do this interview. You had a very interesting life from what I know about it, and you are my neighbor, and we live in Glen Rose, Texas, and it is December the 7th, 2023. And I want to thank you for sitting down and letting me do this interview and I know everybody is interested in your life because I know you've had an interesting life with everything that you've done. So if you will, take over and tell me all about your life.
Sure, Sammy. Thanks for having me over and doing this. Yeah, I've been blessed by the good Lord. My life has been, for me, one big adventure. And I tell my wife that all these movie star action guys that you see, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Tom Cruise, they play those roles, but I lived them, and I did that stuff. I've jumped out of airplanes over the jungles. I've hung on a rope 100 feet long off the bottom of a helicopter, flying around at 3,000 or 4,000 feet, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, but again, thanks for having me over to do this. I'm 73 years old. I was born in Fort Lewis, Washington. My dad was a career soldier, and he was quite the guy. He served in World War II with General Patton. He was a tanker. Then he served in Korea, the Korean War, as an infantryman. And then he served in Vietnam. So he probably had quite a few tales he could tell. But anyway, so like I said, I was born in Fort Lewis and spent most of my childhood traveling back and forth between the United States and Germany. My mom is a German girl. Dad married her after the war. She's a war bride. And we would go to Germany a lot, be stationed there, so she could see her parents because they were still alive. And I remember early on over in Germany, we used to go to the old German bunkers, and we would dig in the walls and dig out bullets and stuff like that, from the Second World War, all that kind of, a lot of little adventures for little kids back then. Fortunately, none of us ever stepped on a mine, so I don't think that was a problem. But anyway, so I grew up, basically, my first memories were, I guess, the flight going to Germany. This would be back in 1956 or so. We flew to Würzburg, Germany, where Dad was stationed, and we spent 4 years there. Left there in 61 or so, and came back to, I think it was Fort Lee, Virginia at that time. And then spent 4 or 5 years in Fort Lee, and then in the 62 or 3, we went over to Kaiserslautern, Germany, and spent 4 years over there. And then came back, and we were in Maryland, I think, then. And then went back to Germany, to Mannheim, Germany. And Mom and Dad stayed there. I left because I turned 19, and I joined the Army. Mm-hmm. It's 1969. Vietnam was still going hot and heavy. And
Cal, won't you go back and tell me about the girls, and you're speaking the German language.
Oh, yeah. That was a funny story. As I mentioned to you earlier, I would spend an entire summer with my German grandparents and would never speak a word of English for 90 or 100 days. It was in Karlsruhe, Germany. So I had to learn German. And that was what you call total immersion. And when you're young, you pick up languages really quick. So by the time I was 16, I was a fluent native German speaker. I mean, I literally spoke German as well as I spoke English. And even my pronunciation and everything was very German. And I had a buddy. His name was, Jake in English. But his name was Jakob. Jakob Mangold, I remember. His father and my father worked together. His father was a German civilian, but worked on the army base. And so Jakob and I became buddies, and we hung around together on weekends and stuff. And we were out one day, and he had another guy with him, and they were picking up their girlfriends, and they said, "We're gonna leave you with the girls. Don't tell them you speak German. And we're gonna leave for a little while. We'll come back because we want to know what they say about us." And so I said, "Sure." So anyway, we did that, and they left, and the girls just kind of looked at me and smiled and started talking to each other in German. And they said a few things about the boys and about me. And so the guys came back, and they said in German to me, "Okay, Cal, what did the girls say about us?" So I fired back in German to them, perfect German, everything the girls had said. And the girls screamed, their faces got real red, all that stuff. And I think they got mad at me. But I did tell the guys, they said this about you guys. But then I said to them too, but you better be careful because they said I was cute. So the girls' faces really got red then. But yeah, that was funny. And it was a good time, just innocent fun. And I remember Jakob, he was kind of a beefy guy. He was a boxer, and he was a pretty good boxer, so amateur boxer. So I hung around with him. We had a lot of fun. But, so my German was pretty good. But anyway, I left in '69.
Well, you told me about your grandfather being in the Prussian army, I believe you.
Oh, yeah.
You had told me that.
Yeah, I had a picture. I found it years later. But someone showed it to me of my German grandfather, and he was really an interesting guy. I'll tell you about him in a minute. But I saw a picture of him mounted on a horse in a Prussian cavalry officer's uniform, carrying a saber. And I thought, man, that is really cool. And that picture had to be from probably the early 1900s, maybe real late 1800s. And, but he was an interesting guy. He was a judge. And of course, when Hitler came into power, a lot of things changed over there, obviously. And my mother would tell me that they would tell their Jewish friends, you know, you guys need to leave, please leave, because this Hitler guy is an ugly man. And but they would say, but this is our home, and they wouldn't leave. So my grandfather was involved in smuggling Jews out of Germany, and I guess he was caught or captured, and he was sent to a concentration camp. And I don't know what happened to him there. I just remember his left hand, his 3 fingers were all crooked, like they'd been broken real bad. Wow. And, my mom told me that really the only thing that saved his life was he had so many friends politically connected. And, you know, just like Donald Trump couldn't get rid of all the bureaucrats in the government, Hitler's the same way. You can never get rid of the bureaucrats. And so the bureaucrats, my grandfather being one of them, they took care of each other, you know. So they got him, instead of a firing squad, sent away. But, and then my mother, she was a nurse during the war for Germans, soldiers, young boys. And I remember her telling me a story. And I don't know if you saw that movie, Saving Private Ryan. Did you see that?
Which one?
Sammy? Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, yes.
Well, remember in Saving Private Ryan, the young guy that was the medic, he was telling stories about how his mother in New York City was working 2 jobs to feed him and his sister.
Wow.
And I didn't understand why they got into that in the movie, because he later got wounded, mortally wounded. And when he was dying, it's like, I know what's going to happen because my mom told me. He started calling for his mother. And it was so sad. You know, it's like, where's my mom? Where's my mom? And I remember because it's had such an impact on me, because my mother told me that.
Yeah.
Back 40 years before this movie was ever made. Because I would ask her, Mom, what was it like for the young soldiers? You know? And she said, well, it was terrible. She said, when they were dying, the boys always asked for their moms.
Wow.
They wanted their moms to hold them.
Wow.
They were scared. And that scene in Saving Private Ryan really tore me up, because, you know, my mom told me about that. But anyway, so both my grandfather and my mother, you know, had interesting lives. Pardon me. A little background on my throat. After I retired from the FBI, and we'll get into that later, but I did contract work in Iraq and Afghanistan. And halfway through my tour in Afghanistan, a year tour, I did about 5 years total, 4 years total in Iraq and Afghanistan in my mid to late 50s and early 60s. But halfway through the tour in Afghanistan, my voice changed. And the guys were all asking, like, are you okay? And I go, yeah, why? Because, you know, you don't realize your voice is different.
Right.
They said, well, you sound like you're sick or something. Long story short, I came back on leave for 2 weeks, had a check. They said, oh, we can't really tell anything. When you come back permanently, you need to go see the specialist. I did. They said, I got cancer in my throat.
Wow.
So they had to do surgery, and they had to put this hole in my throat to help me breathe better. And so I apologize, my voice isn't very good.
Well, that's,
so,
I think you do. I think you do great.
And then, people say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I tell them, don't ever tell me you feel sorry for me. Said, feel sorry for the families. Those young boys we put in boxes and sent home. 18, 19-year-old boys. Never got to have a girlfriend, a wife, family. Those are the ones that had it.
Right.
I'm an old man. I've had my life. So I'm good with what's happened to me. The Lord's taking care of me, and I appreciate it. But anyway,
can you tell me a little bit about your family when you got married first time, your children, and?
Yeah, I got married as a young Army officer in Fort Worth, California. To my wife, Linda. We were married 31 years.
Wow.
And have one son, Jason. And I'll show you the pictures later.
Okay.
I've got pictures of me and my son in Iraq together. He joined the Army at 18 and made it a career, like his grandfather. Right. I spent 6 years in, so, but they made careers out of it. And Jason spent 3.5 years in Iraq.
Wow.
I remember that he would always say, hey, Bob, I can fly out and see you this time. And I'd say, nope, I'll come see you, because I was terrified flying in the air. You never knew when a rocket was going to come up and take out that helicopter. And we had screwed over the Russians by giving the Afghan freedom fighters all of the portable rockets to take down aircraft. I forget the name of them now. But anyway, so I always wondered if the Russians were going to reciprocate and give the Taliban weapons to shoot down our aircraft.
Right. So
I never wanted my son to be hurt or killed trying to come and see me.
Yeah.
So I would fly in to see him. But between 2005, 2012, I spent off and on 4 years over there.
Okay.
And I bet I saw my son, gosh, 10 or 12 times maybe. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, absolutely.
And I got to tell you, my boy's a big kid. He's about 6'2" now. And when I saw him and his buddies all kitted up, suited up to go out on patrols, I thought, well, shit, they scared me just looking at them. So I can imagine what they did to the Iraqi ISIS and all them guys. And that's why they used so many roadside bombs.
Right.
They did not want to face these fine young American studs, because they knew they would get their, pardon my language, asses kicked.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but that's my only child. He's a good boy, and I'm proud of him, and he's a good man. And then I've got one grandchild, Ryan. He's about 23 now, I think.
Yeah.
And both him and his dad are up north of the Metroplex.
Right.
And so I see him, once in a while.
Good.
But that's it for my family.
Well, you told me about when you were Special Forces when you joined the Special Forces.
Yeah, I remember one day I went, this is when I was 17, 18 years old. I went to a Army Career Day thing on the base. And I saw this guy there wearing a green beret. And he had the Medal of Honor hanging around his neck. So I went up and talked to him. And I was just so impressed with this guy. And he wasn't full of himself or nothing, you know what I mean? Just a humble, great American. And I thought, you know what? That's what I'm gonna do. I want to be a Green Beret. And then I saw the movie, The Green Berets with John Wayne. And I thought, man, oh man, I gotta go. So I enlisted in the Army to be an infantryman, paratrooper, Green Beret. So, and you gotta remember, my dad was a career soldier. I grew up in the military.
Right.
So I knew all that stuff. So I went to basic training in 1969 at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Stayed at Fort Dix for advanced infantry training. Each one was about 8 weeks long. And then I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, to Infantry Officer Candidate School. I was so young that I don't know how I could go. But you gotta remember, Vietnam was going on. Infantry officers were a dime a dozen. They were getting killed left and right over in Vietnam. But I just scored really high on the tests. I must have had a good day that day, because I'm not that bright. But anyway, they were hurting for guys. So when I graduated from Infantry Officer Candidate School, I was the youngest officer in the United States Army, I believe. I was just 19 years old. Most of the guys had college degrees and were 22, 23, 24. So I finished Infantry OCS, and then I went straight to airborne school, got my jump wings, and then I was sent to Fort Bragg, North Carolina to go to the Special Forces Officers Course. And I worked in the Foreign Liaison Office for about 6 weeks waiting for my class to start. So I was exposed to Pakistani officers, Indian officers, British officers. They were all coming through courses at Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg was the home of the Army Special Forces. We had a lot of our top-tier schools there. The Halo School, high altitude, low opening. I talked to guys that jumped from 50,000 feet, and they said they free fell for like over 2 minutes before their chute ever opened. I never made it to that school. I wanted to. But anyway, so I went through the Special Forces Officers Course, graduated, and was then assigned to Fort Kulik to the 8th Special Forces Group. We covered Fort Kulik Canal Zone, Panama Canal Zone. We covered South and Central America. Each Special Forces group was designated for a particular region in the world. And so, for that region, you received language training for that region, culture training, all that kind of stuff. All cutting-edge stuff back in those days. And when I was in Panama, I was an executive officer on a Special Forces A-team. They're called ODAs, Operational Detachment Alpha. A-team is what Hollywood calls them. Anyway, I was an executive officer as a young lieutenant, and then we had a young captain who was a commander, and then we had 10 NCOs. And I remember on that 12-man team, we probably spoke 25 different foreign languages fluently. I myself spoke 3 languages. I spoke English, of course, German, and I forgot to tell you, before they sent me to Panama, they sent me to language school for 6 months, Spanish language, total immersion all day long. So my Spanish was pretty good. And, but that's how talented those A-teams were. Just the sheer technical expertise. Not so much the rough, tough, macho stuff. I mean, those guys were that too. A lot of them were Rangers, but they all had that. But more importantly, they had this.
Yeah.
And our mission, the Army Special Forces mission, is theoretically, you get dropped behind enemy lines and you develop resistance forces and start counterinsurgency movements and that kind of stuff. So a Special Forces A-team is trained to train and equip a battalion-sized force of indigenous personnel. Anyway, so I was only there 9 months, supposed to be there 3 months. I remember a couple funny things. One, we were experimenting with different things down there, and one of them was an immediate extraction capability. For example, if you're out in the bush, the jungle, wherever, and, for example, you've got enemy forces on your tail, tracking you, trying to get you, and you can't really land a helicopter. We rigged up a parachute harness and put snap links on the shoulders. And so a helicopter would fly over and drop down this 100-foot rope, and we would snap into it, and the helicopter would take off. And I was doing this, one of the first ones, one of the dummies, test dummies. And, you know, most people think a helicopter goes straight up and down, but they've got to have some forward movement. So it's hovering over you. And then, once you're strapped in and you get the all good to go side, it takes off while it's going forward. So man, I was getting dragged through trees and bushes. I thought, I'm gonna get wedged between a tree. I'm gonna get torn in half or something. So finally it breaks through and I'm up over the canopy, up over the jungle, and flying around, and he goes up to 2,000-3,000 feet, and here I am hanging, swinging around like this. And back in those days, I was like, man, this is the coolest stuff ever. Now, I get up on an 8-foot ladder and my knees start shaking. So, but you know how it is. When you're a young guy, you have no fear.
Oh, yeah.
And then, another funny story, we'd be out in the jungle doing survival training and different stuff. Pardon me.
Well, you want to take a break for a minute, or do you want to?
Let me finish this last and we'll take a break, because I'll forget it. So we were out, and we had like a little hooch place that was just ours for our A-team. It was all set up. We had nice little wood shacks built us, because we'd stay out there for a week or two. And our demolitions guy, back in those days, a lot of guys would take C4. You know what C4 is, Sammy?
Yeah.
It's a plastic explosive.
Right.
And guys would tear a piece off and rub it on their teeth. make your teeth real white. And we used to cook it. You know, you could light it up. It puts out a tremendously hot flame. The only thing is, you got to be careful, is don't stomp it out. If you stomp it out, put pressure on it, then it explodes.
Okay.
But just an open flame, it's not going to hurt you.
Wow.
I mean, we could boil a canteen of water in like seconds then. Well, so one day we're all sitting on the stump, you know, eating some sea rations. And the demo guy, he comes out and puts a little piece under the tree stump, under the log. And boom, we all get lifted about 2 feet off the ground. And he's laughing, it's a big joke. Probably not a smart thing to do, but he knew what he was doing. He's a demolitions expert. But that might be why all of us ended up with bad backs over the years. Who knows? But there was a lot of good camaraderie and good friendship with those guys. And if I had ever to do it again, I would have never left the Army. So anyway, I'll stop here. I came down on orders for Vietnam, so I left Panama, and then I'll pick up after a little break. Okay, well, we're back. I left off where I come down on orders for Vietnam. I was supposed to have been with the 8th Group for 3 years. And, one quick thing. The 8th Group, in our group headquarters trophy case, we had the pen that Che Guevara wrote his famous diary with.
Wow.
And as you know, Che Guevara was killed in, I think it was Bolivia. And he'd been sent by Castro to South America to spread the communist movement.
Yeah.
And I cannot speak officially, but I had heard our guys were down there training the Bolivian Army guys, and that they were actually there when they captured him.
Wow.
So, anyway, just a little sidebar on that 8th Group. And I think they retired the colors, meaning they disbanded the 8th Group in about 1973, shortly after I left. And now the 7th Group covers Latin America, and they're out of Florida, I think, out of England, maybe somewhere around there. But anyway, so I come back, they send me to an advisory school at Fort Bragg with some language training. Then they sent me to Biggs Army Airfield for intensive 6-week language training in Vietnamese. And then I got orders that I was supposed to be an advisor to a Vietnamese Ranger battalion. And I guess that's because of my special forces background. And so about a week before I was supposed to leave, funny story too about it. Throughout the entire course, the language course, only me and one other guy were a combat branch. We were both infantry officers. Everybody else was support, meaning they were transportation officers, quartermaster officers, that kind of stuff. And they would always look at us too, being the infantry guys. Because back then, they were already saying, who's going to be the last guy killed in Vietnam? I don't know if you remember that saying.
No, I don't.
But that was always a thing going around, because they knew we were going to withdraw. So they'd always point at us two guys. One of you guys is going to be the last guy killed in Vietnam. So anyway, a week before I was supposed to go, President Nixon said, no more combat troops. But all the other guys, they had to go to retrieve the equipment, all that logistical stuff.
Sure.
So me and the infantry guy, see you later, guys. Hope you all make it back. You know, that kind of thing. So we got the last laugh on him. So anyway, I called the Department of the Army, and I talked to my career section. And I said, look, guys, you pulled me out of a great assignment down in Panama with the 8th Group to go to Vietnam. Now I'm not going. I said, you guys owe me. And they said, well, what do you want? I said, I want to go to Ranger School. They said, okay. And I said, I want to go to Pathfinder School too. And they go, darn, Lieutenant, we got to get some work out of you. You've been in schools all the time. I said, okay, well, make it Ranger School then. So I went to Ranger School. And I can say, without any hesitation, it's a mentally and physically the most grueling 9 weeks of my life.
Wow.
We started out with a little over 200 guys in this course. We finished with maybe 80. And out of that 80, only about 50 of us got the Ranger tab.
Wow.
So 75% never made it.
Wow.
Ranger School is divided into 3 phases. The patrolling phase, where you learn the basics of combat patrolling and stuff, how to set up ambushes, evasive maneuvers, that kind of stuff, counter ambush drills, immediate action drills, all that stuff. And then, that was at Fort Benning. Well, they've changed the name, whatever it is now, in Georgia. And then we went to the mountain phase up in Dahlonega, northern Georgia, up in the mountains up there. And spent 3 weeks up there. Each phase is 3 weeks. And there we operated in cold environments. We did a lot of rappelling. We'd rappel down the side of rock cliffs that are 100 feet, carrying stretchers, carried a gun on our back, all that kind of stuff. And the year before, in that phase, at the same time of the year, they lost 2 guys in the morning after giving them like a 3-hour sleep break. The guys were stiff as boards, froze to death.
Wow.
So they kept a real close eye on us to make sure we didn't get hypothermia, whatever.
Right.
But I can tell you, it was so cold up there, the water in my canteen froze.
Wow.
Solid block. So I took the water canteen out. I would hold it over fire, because every now and then it got so cold, I guess they're concerned about us freezing. They would let us have a little fire to try to warm up. But, so I put the canteen over, but they were plastic canteens, so all I did was melt a hole in it. So, you know, stuff like that. And I remember, they would tell us to clean our weapons. And your hands are like this, because you're so cold. But they're trying to break you down, Sammy.
Sure.
They want to destroy you. And even I did it. The ranger instructor would come over to me, say, come on, Ranger, get that weapons clean, we gotta go out and patrol. And I would sit there, and I would be crying, literally crying. I'm sorry, Ranger. I'm sorry, Ranger, sorry. I can't move my hands. I can't move my hands. And they would say stuff like, well, I don't give a shit, Ranger. Are you going to tell that to the Russians when you're cold and you can't fire your weapon because you can't clean it? You know what I mean? But there's a method to their madness.
Oh, sure.
And they didn't really expect us to clean our weapons. The whole purpose of Ranger School. It's probably served me well all my life. Maybe that's why I've had the success I've had.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to break you down as far as they could, physically, but see how far mentally did you go.
Right.
Because mentally, if you stay strong, you can survive everything.
Right.
So anyway, we then finished the mountain phase, and I was lucky because you had to pass 3 patrols. They would make you a patrol leader. You had to pass 3 patrols. Well, they gave me a patrol in the patrolling phase in Fort Benning, and I passed that. I had to do a warning order, set up the teams, all that stuff. Then I had 2 patrols up in the mountains. So I already had my 3 patrols. So all I had to do was finish. I was good. And so we went down. I think we jumped into Florida, parachuted in. Anyway, we get to Florida, and this is the jungle phase, because Vietnam was still going on. And we're in the jungles down there by Eglin Air Force Base.
Yeah.
And, well, I tell you what, that was something, Sammy. We did some piddling around for a few days on the base. Then we started doing long patrols, and our final was like a 12-day patrol. We were out in the jungle for 12 days. And some really strange things there. I remember first, my right knee was about as big as a cantaloupe. I think I tweaked it or twisted it when we parachuted in. And every day, I'd take my K-bar knife out and I'd slice it, and the water would run out. And then that evening, it would be all big again. And the ranger sergeant came over, and he probably thought, man, poor son of a gun, you know. So he came over and was kind of nice, you know.
Yeah.
Not that they were really mean to us before, but they wanted to make sure you understood they weren't your buddies.
Yeah.
They were your instructors. So they were always firm and disciplined. But this guy came over and he knew I was an officer, even though we didn't wear rank. They knew who the officers were. So he said to me, he said, because they call us Rangers. He said, Ranger, he said, there's no shame. We can send you back, get healed up, get fixed up, and you'll start with the next class at this same phase, the jungle phase. And I looked at him and I said, nah, Sergeant. He said, I'm scared to death if I leave here, I'll never come back. Because, I mean, it was miserable.
Yeah.
And the thought of warm bed and warm food, it was miserable, Sammy. And he said, you sure? I said, yes, sir, I said. So, well, I'm going to keep an eye on you. And whether you like it or not, if I see you falling behind or if your leg gets worse, you know, we're going to send you back. So they'd inspect my leg every other day or so. I made it through, so thank the Lord. But anyway, we're out in the jungle one day on a patrol. It's on our 12-day patrol. And we're in water up to our waist. And I remember initially we went in on rubber rafts, just like in the movies. And this is like February, March, Florida, North Florida. It's getting a little warmer during the day, but at night it's colder than you know what.
Right.
But anyway, I remember during the day we'd be paddling, and where you'd see a ray of sunshine coming down, you'd see a water moccasin on a branch, you know, getting the sun.
Getting the sun.
And every now and then we'd hear a plop, and we knew that was them falling
in the water.
It's probably still cold enough that they couldn't move very fast anyway. But still, you know.
They're there.
And so we're on patrol, and we're in water up to our lower chest, above our waist. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. And you would hear guys all around you freaking out, start hallucinating. Because many times you haven't slept for 2 days,
right.
3 days. You've had very little food to eat. Your entire system is getting about as low as it can get before you go comatose or something. So, it was like a horror movie. It's pitch black outside, and you hear guys screaming, he's got me, you know, crazy stuff. And I remember, I don't think I ever screamed, but I remember looking up at a real starry night and hallucinating. I thought they were car headlights coming at me. So I'm going like this. You know,
dodging the cars.
Dodging the cars. And when you're wet, and you've been wet a long time, and you're in the jungle, there's only one thing you think about. You know what that is, Sammy?
Getting out.
Well, in a way, high ground, right? Because what's at high ground? Well, what's not at high ground? Water.
Water.
You know, you're going to be dry. So, in the jungle at deep night, the jungle trees look like hills and stuff. And in a jungle, you can't navigate by terrain recognition.
Yeah.
Because you can't see anything. Plus, it's a jungle. Even in the daytime, you couldn't see.
Right.
So the only thing you can rely on is that azimuth on your compass.
Mm-hmm.
You got to stay on that azimuth. If you deviate from that azimuth, you're screwed. So we'd be going on our azimuth in a foul formation, real close to each other because it's so pitch black. And all of a sudden, you'd hear a guy yell, "High ground, 3 o'clock." Everybody would shoot off at 3 o'clock. If you're traveling this way, that's 12 o'clock. Behind you is 6. To your right is 3. To your left is 9. That's how you do stuff. And so a bunch of guys would take off 3 o'clock. So you go over there, catch up with them. Then you get organized, get back in line.
More water.
And then, no, there never was high ground. It was just jungle, yeah. And then a guy would say, "Oh no, high ground, 7 o'clock." They'd all take off backwards. So after about 20 minutes of this, you get everybody settled down. What do you think's happened to your azimuth? It's shot. Your azimuth is now shot. You don't know where you're going to end up at. But anyway, so those are just some of the funny stories, you know, from down at Ranger School. And I know I went in, I was a skinny kid, 5'10", 150 pounds, 55 pounds. I probably lost 20 pounds. I mean, I was skin and bones. And everybody was, you know, because you never got to eat much, you know. And I remember the big jock guys, you know, guys who played college ball and stuff like that. Guys who went to West Point, played college ball. They had a tough time because they needed calories and they weren't getting them. You know, so anyway, that was Ranger School. It taught me a lot. But I tell you, when you wear the golden black Ranger tab on your uniform, whenever soldiers see you, they're like,
It's
respect.
elite.
Yeah. And I bet when I was in, there weren't guys that were Ranger and SF, Green Berets. It had to be less than 1/2 of 1% in the Army, you know.
Wow.
You just didn't see it that much. But anyway, so when I finished Ranger School, I got orders assigning me to Fort Ord, California. This is in 1972, 71, 72. And I was assigned as the executive officer at a training company, the Combat Support Training Brigade. And, you know, I tried to get assigned to the 101st Airborne at Fort Campbell, but all those slots were taken up by the West Point guys, you know, so I ended up at Fort Ord. I remember when I reported into the brigade commander, forget his name now, but really a nice guy. He was a lieutenant colonel, or the battalion commander, I'm sorry. Brigade commander was a full colonel. Walby was his name, nice guy too. And the battalion commander, he's a, forget his name, but super nice guy. And I reported in, told me to sit down, we had a cup of coffee, welcomed me to the unit. He said, "You got any questions?" And I said, "Yes, sir," I said. And I don't by any means mean to sound offensive or superior, but, you know, I'm an ex-Army Special Forces guy, a Ranger, paratrooper. Why do you think they send me to a training brigade, you know, instead of a regular tactical unit? And he kind of smiled, chuckled, and said, "Well, you're going to find out." He said, "We specifically request guys like you." And I said, "Okay." Well, what happened at the time, That's when the Army was going to the all-volunteer Army. And back in those days, judges cleared out the county jails. Son, you can either go in the Army or you can go to jail for 2 years. What do you want? Well, I'll take the Army, Your Honor. Yeah. So we got a lot of thugs coming in.
Yeah.
So my job was to straighten out that company. The company commander was a nice guy, but he was a transportation officer. He wasn't a hardcore gung-ho infantry type, you know. So I walked in there and I started cleaning house almost immediately. I mean, I went in one day and I saw 2 guys spooning heroin in the latrine. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd walk to the barracks at night, see what's going on. And I'd say, what have you been doing? And there might be a kid shaving at the sink. And these 2 guys are like Oakland, inner city guys. Well, that's his. And I'd look at the country boy type and say, is that true, soldier? Is that yours? And he'd say, yes, sir. And I'd say, bullshit. I'd say, get out of here. And I'd say, you 2, come with me. And I took him to the orderly room. Back in those days, we had a mail cage where they kept all the mail. Mm-hmm. We didn't use it much anymore because mail had been centralized in brigade headquarters. So, and then it was passed out during formation by the first sergeant in the mornings. So we didn't use it for anything. Well, I used it for jail. I locked them guys in there. I told the charge of quarters CQ, young sergeant, I said, make sure whatever you do, you don't leave this building. Because it's a wood building. If a fire ever happens, them guys are locked in a cage. You and I are both in trouble. If something happens, unlock that gate, let them run wherever they want. So anyway, apparently these guys told their military lawyer, because we're gonna court-martial them for drugs and discharge them. They told their military lawyer I locked them up in a cage. So the battalion commander sent down for me to come up and see him. And I'd say, yes, sir, and he kind of smiled. He said, Cal, he said, I appreciate what you're doing. You're doing a good job, but we can't be locking you guys up in that cage. He said, just to remove the temptation, I've had him take that cage out. So no more locking guys up in cages. I said, okay, sir. So the next time I go in, and I see a kid sleeping out in his car, the motor running. It's cool at night. And I'll knock on the window. What are you doing here, soldier? How come you're not sleeping in the barracks? Well, sir, I didn't have any money to pay for the barracks. So what are you talking about? Well, there's a guy there that says we have to pay him $50 a month to sleep in the barracks. I said, who? Private so-and-so. I said, okay. Again, another Oakland kind of guy. And I go wake him up out of bed. And I said, come with me. He comes with me, and I don't have no mail cage anymore. So I handcuffed him to the company safe. He ain't going nowhere. I told the CQ, here's the key. It's a wooden building. If we have a fire, you unlock this guy, let him run. And so I get a call. Lieutenant, the battalion commander wants to see you. So I go back up to the battalion commander's office. Got a big old smile on his face. Cal, you're doing a great job down there. Appreciate it. He said, but we can't be locking guys up to the company safe. It could be a fire hazard, yada. Yes, sir. And then, as I'm leaving, he'd say, but keep up the good work, Cal. You're doing a great job. He's just covering his tail, you know.
Telling himself.
So anyway, that first year I was there, I think I put out 70 guys on administrative discharges.
Wow.
They're not fit for the military. They were just released from jail.
Yeah.
From some judge's jail to become somebody else's problem.
Right.
So, and then later on I got promoted to captain. I understand that I was in the running to be the aide to the commanding general, which was really an honor because I was a infantry officer cadet school guy.
Right.
The aide jobs, they usually went to the West Pointers, you know.
Yeah.
So, and then I was also told I was in the running to be the company commander of the all-female wax company, and which was also an honor because they would only take somebody they could trust,
Right.
you know. And supposedly, the general said, "Yeah, I know Captain Sieg, he's a good man, but he's a good-looking kid. I don't want them girls chasing after him and having too much temptation." So they got an older guy, you know, guy married. And I remember another funny story. Two, actually. They're not funny, but they're cute. Because these soldiers were great kids. I love them to death. They're the best that America has. And I had trouble in one of the barracks. Now I'm a commander. And I got to figure out how to have somebody there all the time. So I took the biggest dude I could find. Anderson was his name. Big young black kid. Nicest guy in the world. I called him into my office. And I think he was from Mississippi or Alabama. A country black guy. Those were the best soldiers. They were hardworking, good guys. And I said, "Anderson, I need you to do something for me. And I think you're the man for the job." He goes, "Yes, sir, Captain. What do you want me to do?" I said, "Well, I want you to keep that barracks tip-top shape. I don't want any bullshit going on in there. I don't want nobody smoking dope. Don't want none of that stuff. That's your barracks. You're the mayor. You're the chief of police. You're the cop on the beat. You keep it straight." "Oh, yes, sir, I'll do that." I said, "Okay." And I said, "But don't kill anybody." "No, sir." So anyway, long story short, old Anderson, them guys would try to smoke a little dope, and they'd give him backlip. He whipped the shit out of them, man. He took care of them. Finally, he went a little too far. I think he'd had a couple beers one night, and went a little too far, and almost hurt a kid pretty bad. But so I had to call him in, take his stripe away, and I said, "Anderson, you're a good troop, but you can't do this. You gotta quit drinking that beer." I said, "I'm sending you to alcohol rehab. I want you to go through that because I need you back here. I need you to finish the job." "Yes, sir." And his face was as long as you could imagine. He felt so bad. So he finally came back and he finished his 6 weeks, you know, alcohol rehab, and I sent him back in and everything worked out fine. And then he graduated, he came back, I heard him knock on the door, asked the first sergeant, "Can I see the captain?" And first sergeant said, "Yeah, go on in." And the top first sergeant kind of yelled at me over his shoulder, "Captain, we got Anderson coming in to see you." I said, "Sure." So he came in and reported, you know, stood at attention, and I said, "Relax, Anderson. What's up?" He said, "Sir, I just want to come by. Thank you." He shook my hand. He said, "I made it through, and I probably wouldn't have made it through without you." He said, "So I just want to thank you, and my mama said to say thank you too. I wrote her and told her about you." And when he shook my hand, hands like Sonny Liston, big old hands. And I was, "That's nice of you, Anderson, to come in and say that." And I told him, I said, "I want to tell you, I'm really proud of what you've done. You're a good man. You'll be a good sergeant, a good soldier, and I expect someday you're going to be sergeant major. So you just keep doing a good job and keep making me proud." He said, "Yes, sir." He shook my hand and said goodbye. It was, I miss those days, Sam.
Oh, sure you do.
And then I had another kid, young white kid, and he was kind of slow. Nice kid, but he was kind of slow. And I could tell right away we're going to have trouble getting him through.
Yeah.
Not because of disciplinary. He's just not, he ain't going to make it, you know.
Didn't have the...
And so I remember he always talked about his mother. And he didn't call him my mom. He called her his mama, my mama. And he came in one day to talk to me. And he said his mama was having trouble at home. And I said, okay. I said, what I can do is I can go ahead and discharge you. And it won't be a bad discharge. It'll just be a general discharge, you know. Or actually, it might have even been an honorable. Because he hadn't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
Like a hardship discharge to go home and take care of his mama. So anyway, we did that. But anyway, the day he was leaving, he came in and he built this model, this fighter jet model. And he said, sir, I made this for you. And it was really cute. And I really appreciate it. It was cute in the sense that you could see globs of glue stuck on the side. You know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure.
But it was from his heart.
Well, it was the best you could do.
And so I accepted it and I kept it all the rest of my days there.
Wow.
And but anyway, I get kind of long-winded, but those days that I spent in the Army were the best days of my life, Sammy.
Right.
I mean, where else could a young 22-year-old guy be a captain in the Army, have 260 men under his command, have a cadre of 16 NCOs, have a mess hall with a mess sergeant, chow where you feed all, and then a supply room. I'm responsible for all that.
I know.
You know, so where else can you have that kind of stuff, you know?
Okay.
One last story about the Army, and that is, we had an unfortunate incident where a white military police officer shot a black soldier. So some kind of race riots started, small, because it's a military base.
Yeah.
But still going on. And the men that were permanently assigned to the base, they were always referred to as permanent party, meaning they were there permanent. They weren't transient, like the soldiers there for their 8 weeks of training.
Right.
Well, anyway, so a group of 6 or 8 black soldiers, permanent party, were walking down in my company area. And I was sleeping in the company because of what was going on. I wanted to have a presence all the time. And this is while Anderson was still there. And these guys walked out and they saw me getting near dusk by myself, walking around the company area, a white officer. And they said, let's go get that white MF, you know. And some of my soldiers up in the barracks heard that because the windows were open and stuff. And before you could count to 3, I had 10 or 15 guys behind me, mostly all black.
Right.
My soldiers, you know.
Right.
And they told these permanent party guys, you ain't gonna do nothing to our captain. We're gonna whip your ass. You know, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, you know, it was bittersweet for me leaving the Army.
Sure.
But I left the Army in 1975. I got accepted to law school at Baylor. I'd finished my college degree, going to school at night over a period of 3 or 4 years. My dad got sick. I thought he might have a terminal disease. So I got out of the Army to be with him, just in case, the worst. As it turned out, he lived another 40 years, so they had found something in his lung, and they figured it was something he picked up in Vietnam when he was there. Some fungus, something. And anyway, I went to law school at Baylor, graduated, worked as an assistant county prosecutor in Waxahachie, Texas for about a year. And then I'd had an application with the FBI. And I finally got a letter saying, report to the academy, November 12th, 1978. So I went off to the FBI Academy, did my 16 weeks of training there. Went to Omaha, Nebraska, started my FBI career. And it was a lot of fun. I got to do a couple things that most people don't get to do. I got with the Nebraska State Police, their automotive theft unit, and we started a sting operation. We were buying stolen parts, car parts, stolen cars. Anyway, it was the first sting ever in the state of Nebraska, and I put it together as a young agent, and we ended up, I think, arresting 20 or 30 guys all over several counties. Then a funny story was the word came out that Sioux City, Iowa was wanting to borrow an FBI agent to work undercover because all their people were known up there. So the ASAC, Assistant Special Agent in charge, put out the word, anybody want to volunteer for this undercover assignment? They had used 2 Iowa state troopers to work undercover. But they said those 2 guys would never go somewhere without the other one being with them.
Right.
And they weren't getting much done. So I went in to volunteer. Johnny Evans was the ASAC's name. Good guy. I said, Johnny, I'd like to volunteer. He looked at me and he said, you? I said, yeah. He said, you can't volunteer. Look at you. You look like an FBI agent. You're too clean cut. You got a nice suit on. Got a nice haircut. How are you going to work undercover? I said, okay. Well, nobody volunteered because Sioux City was kind of a shitty area anyway. Yeah. A lot of packing plants. It closed down. There's a lot of unemployment,
Oh, sure.
A lot of thievery going on. Country outlaw type. So, about a week later, Johnny came to me and said, you still want to do the undercover? So I knew it was coming, so I said to him, yeah, I'd like to, but I'm too handsome, clean cut, and good looking to do undercover work. And he said, okay, knock it off. He said, do you want to do it or not? I said, heck yeah, I'll do it. He said, okay. I said, well, I got to start growing a beard and long hair. He said, okay. So, anyway, I'm up there working in Sioux City, Iowa for a year. I came down to the office one time, because it just wasn't, security-wise, a good thing. Sioux City was about 120 miles away. So I went in the office real early in the morning, because most all the bad guys all slept till noon anyway, because they're out thieving all night. So I walked in the receptionist's office, and I said, let me in, I need to go in. And the girl didn't know who I was. And I said, let me in, I need to go see somebody. And she said, I saw her hand reaching for the security buzzer. You know where you ring it? Aides come storming out, right?
Right.
So I said, Jackie, or whatever her name was. I said, Jackie, don't hit that damn button. It's me, it's Cal. Don't hit that button. Somebody will come out here and bump you in the head. She said, Cal. She looked at me. I said, yeah, it's me. Let me in, I need to see Johnny. She said, oh, I don't even recognize you. So anyway, I go back there and see Johnny. And he goes, man, he says, look at you. You look like a gangster. I had a long beard, long hair. I said, see, told you I could do it. So anyway, we're getting ready to wrap up the case. It's been a year-long thing, a lot of things going on. Can't get into all of them, but anyway, I get arrested with some guys. And they had to arrest me because I was giving somebody $50,000 or $100,000 in cash. back in those days, that was a lot of money. We couldn't let that walk.
Sure.
So the deal was, when I go out on the porch to say goodbye to these guys, if I wave goodbye to them with my right hand, that means the deal went down. If I wave goodbye to them with my left hand, the deal didn't go down, so don't come in, because they don't have the money. Well, I wave goodbye to the right, because they had the money. And so we all got arrested, including me. So we get booked in at the marshal's office, take prints, take pictures. I think I've got my book in picture still somewhere. I'll show it to you. And
well, that would be good if you could help.
Yeah, I'll find it. Anyway, I report in. We go before the magistrate, and the magistrate says, "Can you men make bail?" There's 3 of us, and I said, "No, sir." I said, "I ain't got no money." Trying to talk like them. And the one guy said, "I ain't got no money, but I'm a hare." And the magistrate said, "What?" He said, "I'm a hare, like a hair on your head." He said, "What do you mean you're a hare?" So I said, "Judge, if you don't mind me interrupting, I think what my friend is trying to say is he's an heir, he's in somebody's will. So that's the money you would have." And of course the magistrate got his bows. Well, that wouldn't be good enough anyway. So we end up going back in the jail cell. And these 2 guys are from Sioux Falls. They're from Sioux Falls. And they've been buddies since kindergarten, right?
Yeah.
So we sit in there, and we're sitting in the cell. I'm sitting across from them. They're sitting there, and there's long bench going down the length of the cell, the big holding cell. And I look at them, and they're looking at me. So right now, everybody's trying to figure out, how did we all end up in jail? So I look at them, and I say, "You know what? I've been operating this town for over a year now. I ain't had no effing problems." I said, "One of you two's bad, and I'm gonna find out who it is. Because I had a sweet deal going, making good money, and now you 2 clowns show up, and I'm busted. One of you, or both of you." And so, I'll never forget this. They kind of looked at each other, and they moved apart from each other. So, anyway, we go to trial. This is months later, maybe a year later. And they're there at the trial. And I'm standing outside the courtroom because I'm testifying. No long hair, no beard, nice suit. Look like an FBI. Jared would have been proud. And while I'm testifying, they're playing the recordings. Because I wore body recorders, all that stuff. And my language was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Actually, it's really bad. You talk to them the way they talk to you.
Yeah.
So, we got some nice little old ladies sitting on a jury. And I'm looking over there kind of sheepishly when they're playing my recording. And there's a bunch of these MFs coming out and all that stuff. And I feel really bad. But this one little old lady, she looked at me and she just smiled like that. Like, "It's okay, son. We know you did what you had to do." You know what I mean? So, they all got convicted, of course. And while I'm out in the hallway, one of them comes up to me. It says, "You know, if you ever go on around here, you have to be careful. You could end up in one of these hidden wells or something." You know, like trying to make a threat. I just looked at him and I told him, I said, "You and your buddy are clowns." I said, "You think you're going to scare me? come up here with your movie BS. I said, if you're so tough, I said, I'll be outside in about 20 minutes. Then you come on down. So otherwise, get the F away from me. Probably the hardest thing was a couple of the guys were not bad. Mm-hmm. They just chose the wrong job. Thieving. This one guy, he hired me to steal his car to do insurance fraud. Then he hired me to burn down this one building. A couple other things. And I would hang around with him a lot. We're out in the bars drinking at night and stuff. And we'd go home. His wife would fix us breakfast. His kids would come up and sit on my lap. And they'd call me Uncle CJ. That was my name, CJ Moore. Calvin Joseph Moore. And yeah, Moore. Yeah, like you. Except I think I had an E on the end of mine.
Right.
And so during the trial, his wife came up to me and said, you know, you were part of our family. You know, how could you do this to us? And all I could say was, I'm sorry, Mary, you know, I'm just doing my job. You know, you can't go through life stealing from people.
Yeah.
But that didn't mean anything to her. Her man was going to prison for a while, and it was because of me. But being a lawyer, I understand entrapment, and I would never want to do that to anybody.
Yeah.
So I never asked them guys, or never put an idea in their head. Well, you know, if you burn your house down, your insurance will pay you a bunch of money. Never did that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Some guys do, but I would
They
never
have to
do
egg
it.
it on a little bit.
Yes, because I feel like you're taking advantage of a man that's down on his luck.
Yeah.
But if he comes to me and says, like one guy did, I got hired to kill a guy. So I never put the idea in his head. Matter of fact, I tried to dissuade him from it. He said to me, this guy's going to testify against us. I want you to kill him. I said, okay. I said, but, you know, this is a serious thing you asked me to do. Once it's done, there ain't no going back. Are you sure about this? Hell yeah, I'm sure. That somebody's going to put me in prison for 20 years if I don't shut him up. So, well, he ended up spending 40 years in prison for trying to kill a witness. You know, and I had all this stuff on tape.
Yeah.
You know, and so that was a lot of fun. And that was my 4 years in Omaha.
Yeah.
And I'd made some good cases, so it was like kind of a successful,
Right.
you know, first assignment for me. And I enjoyed Nebraska. I was in Omaha, we covered Nebraska and Iowa. I enjoyed Nebraska and Iowa because they're good, solid, all-American people. And I would go out to some farms where I'd have to do like a background investigation on somebody that's being considered to be a judge.
Yeah.
And these people know him, or it might be some old teacher. But when I would get there, pardon me, always they would invite me in for a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. Really.
It's
So
good country people.
It is. I just hated the winters there.
Yeah.
They were brutal. Important events in my, you know, professional life, and also significant in American history. The first one happened when I was stationed in San Juan, Puerto Rico. We have an office there because, as you probably know, San Juan is a commonwealth of the United States.
That is when you were with the FBI, right?
That's correct. When I was with the FBI. And on New Year's Eve of 1986, 85 or 86, I think it was 86, but it was New Year's Eve, there was this huge fire at a real exclusive resort/hotel in San Juan, and it was called it was in the Condado, a region of San Juan, real touristy region. It's the Dupont Plaza Hotel, and there was a fire there. And as far as I know, it's still, in terms of loss of life, the largest single hotel fire in U.S. history. 99 people lost their lives. Anyway, the fire raged on. We got there to start doing, crime scenes and all that stuff. And it had been determined it was arson. And what had happened is the Puerto Rican Teamsters Union, I think if I remember right, they call them truncadores, something like that. Anyway, Teamsters, hotel staff, they were in labor negotiations for enhanced benefits, pay raises, that kind of stuff, more vacation time.
Yeah.
Typical union stuff, And so someone would start little fires in trash cans and stuff, little harassing fires. And it was to scare the customers, who in turn would talk to management, and management would be intimidated. So they were open to push us along. And apparently what had happened is a guy named Sampson, and I'll get into him in a minute. He put a can of Sterno on top of some boxed furniture they kept in the basement, for continuously upgrading. But the basement had like a false ceiling, and this was right on the coast. And there's always an updraft in there. Well, it updrafted, and it came into the hotel, and it hit the casino as a fireball. And there was a Secret Service agent in there. I think he was doing an investigation at the time, maybe interviewing some people. And he was one of the ones that was killed. I knew him. I felt, bad for him. But anyway, that fire turned into a fireball and literally exploded and melted everything in there. And I remember going through the hotel, I came upon an elevator shaft, and one of the saddest sights I've ever seen in my life, Sammy. There was a gentleman probably in his 50s, maybe early 60s, younger than me. Everybody's younger than me. But anyway, except you, Sammy. But anyway, he was sitting in the corner, and he had two young girls, maybe 20, early 20s, and he was like that, with his arms around him, one on each side, all sitting down. And the bodies were undisturbed. They had died from smoke inhalation, but no heat had gotten in there. And it was just a sad sight to see. And you can imagine the terror going through those young girls' lives. And that gentleman was compassionate enough to hold them, and try to make him feel less afraid, I guess. Anyway, really a sad sight. But anyway, and then I remember there was a lady, because her husband told us afterwards, a corpse was up on the top parapet right above the pool, maybe a 15-foot drop, and people jumped from there because the fire was so hot, and they would break ankles and break legs, but they lived. And this guy, this husband, he told his wife, "Come on, honey, jump, I'll catch you." She was afraid to jump. And so her charred remains were still up there in the position with her hands behind her like she's going to push herself off. And it was the spookiest thing I've ever seen. But anyway, just a terrible tragedy. There's a story about there was one couple, an old farming couple from Nebraska, had saved all their life for a vacation like this, and they were, victims too. So really sad. But anyway, there was let me back up. I was responsible for ensuring all the kitchen help got interviewed. So I was like a team leader, I guess you could call it. And I'd send agents. We paired up with an ATF agent and an FBI agent. So I sent an agent team to talk to the kitchen staff because I'd heard there's a guy named Sampson who was a union strongman.
Mm-hmm.
And so they went and supposedly interviewed the head chef and a couple other people. And they said they don't really know anything and you know about Sampson either and stuff. So I said, well, all right. So I sent somebody else down there, or maybe I went. But anyway, whatever the response was, it really piqued my interest about the Sampson guy. So I called him, asked him to come to the FBI office for an interview. And he did. And so me and another agent were sitting behind a desk, and he was sitting in a chair by himself, isolated, the way you wanted. And we were asking questions and stuff. He didn't know anything about it, yada, yada, yada. And then I purposely looked down at my notes and was quiet for about 30 seconds because I wanted to see his reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And he started humming to himself. And I looked over at Abby, the agent with me, and I said, you know, this is our guy. So I started talking to him, and I said, like, I remember this. I said, you know, whoever did this is carrying a tremendous amount of guilt because I know they never intended to kill anybody. Mm-hmm. It's just a union thing. But can you imagine the poor guy? He killed 99 people, 99 mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters. And he broke down. He started crying. He said to me in Spanish, en mi corazón, in my heart, Dios sabe, God knows, I never meant to hurt anybody.
Yeah.
So you know, you got to stay professional, you know.
Sure.
And I say, no, I understand that. And I said, but you understand that you're going to have to answer for this. And I said, I got to read you your rights. Because before, he was voluntarily there. Mm-hmm. So he's not in custody. So you're not required to read somebody their rights.
Right.
And he was free to go up to the point where he said, in my heart, God knows I didn't mean to hurt anybody.
Yeah.
Then he's under arrest. He's not going anywhere of his own volition. So we read him his rights and interviewed him and all that. And I developed this, it sounds strange, but I developed this real bond with him. And they called him Samson because he was a former Mr. Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. He was a short guy, maybe 5'7", but, you know, muscular build. Sure. And, but I had to take him to the marshal's office, to the courts and all that. And I had to put a bulletproof vest on him because the people in Puerto Rico wanted to kill him because their livelihood depends on tourism. Right. And can you imagine what this did for tourism? So, and then I remember one time we were taking him to the U.S. magistrate and the Puerto Rican cops tried to grab him. And I remember literally hitting them and pushed them back because they wanted to get him. And so anyway, when he was convicted, he pled guilty to 99 counts of murder. He's never going to see outside of a bar again, prison. But so I went to the marshal service. They had him in the cell there to say goodbye to him. And, you know, I wished him good luck. And I told him, I said, you know, I know you've got a terrible burden to carry the rest of your life. And you did a stupid thing. And, you know, I'll pray for you and hope you find peace with God, you know. And, you know, but you couldn't overlook the fact, all the lives he'd taken, you know.
Right.
But really, in my mind, the ones that were responsible was the union management. But we never could make a case against them, you know. They gave this guy up. You know, he was their scapegoat, so to speak. But he actually did it, probably did it on somebody's orders.
Right.
But anyway, so when he's saying goodbye, he gave me a big hug and held on to me. And he said, "Thank you for being so nice to me and being so understanding." And I still think about that. And I think I'm going to contact somebody at the Bureau of Prisons and find out where he's at.
Yeah.
And I want to go see him. And just,
Yeah.
It was a big deal. But anyway, so that was a kind of a historical thing. And then that was in 86, 87. And then, 5 years later, boom, I'm down in Waco, the Branch Davidians, and Waco is actually covered by the San Antonio office.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a resident agency in Waco, like a 2-man office, 3-man office. But physically, Waco's closer to Dallas than it is to San Antonio. So our SWAT team was the first SWAT team down there. And I remember when we went down there, and before we left, our special agent in charge, Buck Ravel, good guy, he stalked us all in the basement. We're getting our equipment ready. And I remember him saying, "You guys," he said, "this is the real deal, be careful. We got 6 or 7 dead ATF agents, countless others wounded, and just be careful." So anyway, we went down there, and I remember when I got there, walked around doing a survey, because I was a SWAT team. I hate to use the term sniper. Mm-hmm. I was like a SWAT team. You can call me a counter sniper or a marksman. Wow. Anyway, I carried the long rifle with the scope. So I could hit targets 500, 600, 800 yards. But anyway, so I was doing a survey of the area, because that's part of the job for the counter snipers, getting intel in the area of operations. So I'm looking around and walking around, and man, it looked like a battlefield, Sammy. There was rags with blood all over them and stuff, hanging off tree branches and stuff. It was a bad day for ATF. They got their nose bloody pretty good down there. And then I remember there was a lot of controversy. ATF wanted to be involved and all that stuff, and we told them, no, you guys are too emotionally invested in this thing. And because, see, the FBI has jurisdiction for assaults against federal officers.
Right.
ATF's jurisdiction, like DEA, is very limited and narrow in scope. The FBI is the primary investigative agency for the U.S. government. But, so anyway, we would let some of them go with us when they would release hostages and stuff. But anyway, I remember, it's funny, there's always a little bit of humor in some tragedies, maybe you do it to keep yourself going, but with my military background, I was out from 6 in the morning to 6 at night, we were out there. And this is like in February, March, and April. Mm-hmm. So it's still getting dark early and staying dark late, and it's cold. But, so I had a position with another guy, and I would have a little fire going, and I would get tortillas from one of the places in Waco, and I'd get some canned chicken and that cheese that you spray out of a can, and have me like little chicken enchiladas and stuff like that. And these other guys are all eating crackers. So they wanted to come over, want me to feed them. And it was kind of humorous. And then I remember the Houston SWAT team was relieving us, and those son of a guns took all of our firewood and burned it, So we had to go cut more firewood when we got there in the morning. Stuff like that. But anyway, but we were there the day it happened, and we were there the day of the fire.
Wow.
We were there pretty much 95% of the time. We just went home for like a few days to rest and recuperate, and then they called us back and said, "Come back, we're going to assault the place." And by assault, I mean they took armored vehicles with cannons on them, and they would puncture the plywood, and they would spray an aerosol in there. We didn't use anything that was a pyrotechnic because we were afraid it could start a fire. So that's how careful we were. And I still get mad when I think about the media, the public, saying that we killed those people, we burned them and all. It's ridiculous, you know, how people, you know, are so easily led. We had shots fired at us. We had one of our agents go in and get a lady that was out on fire. He went out from the protection of the vehicle to put the fire out and bring her back, and she was fighting him. She wanted to go back in. Wow. All that stuff. But anyway, another interesting thing, you know, perception is not reality always. And so we're all sitting in a hangar the morning of, and they're puncturing, and then we see a fire starting upstairs. We all know now that they'd started the fires in there themselves.
Wow.
And anyway, the small children, they all had contact wounds, meaning the barrel was touching their head, their skull, when the round was discharged. They'd killed all the children there, I guess so they wouldn't suffer in the fire. But they set the fire themselves. But anyway, we, like I say, we took rounds, and when the fire started, we were all sitting there in a hangar, and we all started clapping.
Wow.
You know, hey, watching them guys are gonna scurry out like little rats now, you know.
Right.
And after a few minutes, we got real quiet. Nobody said a word. We all knew, shit, they're not coming out, man. These guys, they're all gonna die. Women, kids. We didn't know the kids had been killed.
Yeah.
Yet, the men. So, you know, if the media had been in there with us, I'm sure it would have been all over the news. FBI cheers. It's 100 people burned up, you know. You know what I mean, Sammy? So, again, it's always perception. But we, of course, we figured everybody's going to come running out, you know. But they were all really radical, just like that. Was that Jonestown?
Yeah, Georgetown.
Jonestown, yeah.
Jones, what's his name? Jones.
Jim Jones. When all those people committed suicide, you know. And it was the same there. I mean, shoot, early on, one guy was in town when the raid started, and he actually got in a gunfight with some Texas Rangers trying to get back inside the compound after we were surrounded. That's how crazy them people were. Yeah. You know. And I remember back then, people were saying, because it was dragging on, when is this going to be over? It's costing the government $1 million a day. And finally, Janet Reno said, we got to end this. And I gave her credit. I had met her before.
Sure.
Really a nice lady. But I give her credit for making a tough decision. And she said afterwards, you know, the buck stops with me. Right. I made the call. And she said, you know, the agents, FBI's, nobody did anything wrong. Those people were hell-bent on, you know, what they did.
Destroying themselves.
Yeah. So anyway, those are just, you know, a couple of events I forgot about. They were really pretty significant, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
And I still, to this day, think about both of them, you know. I ended up doing, 4 years in Omaha, Nebraska, 79 to 83. Then 83 to 87, San Juan, Puerto Rico. Then 87 to 90, I was a senior resident agent in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Our headquarters office was Albuquerque. I was in a satellite office in the FBI. They're called resident agencies. And then from there, I got my office of preference. I got my seniority transfer. By this time, I had enough seniority, I could go to my home, which was Dallas. So I went back to Dallas because Mom and Dad were still there in Waxahachie. I spent about 9 years in Dallas.
Okay.
And in my last few years in Dallas, I was full-time as a legal advisor. It was a promotion. Then I took a bigger promotion and went to Clarksburg, West Virginia. Was there from 99 to 2001, one or two. And then my final transfer, I wanted to retire out of the field. I didn't want to retire out of a headquarters element. So I went to Monroe, Louisiana, was the supervisory senior resident agent. I had 7 or 8 agents in Monroe, and then I had 3 agents down by Fort Polk. Forget the name of the town now. Getting old.
Oh, Fort Polk. It was Alexandria.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alexandria, correct, Sam. Well, Sam, you know, been around. I had 3 agents down in Alexandria. So I spent two and a half years there and retired. Came home, and when I say home, came back to Texas, to Waxahachie. Kind of laid around for 8 months. I mean, financially, I didn't have to go to work, but I'm 54 years old, and I've had 26 years of an adrenaline rush, and I guess you can't expect to just stop and play golf every day.
Right. Yeah.
So I ended up at the age of 54 going over to Iraq as a security contractor. So I spent 2 years in Iraq as a security contractor I had to sign non-disclosure agreements, but it's just a certain government agency, if you know what I mean, that works overseas, that's not allowed to work in the United States. So I did security for their personnel. I got pictures and I can try to find it for you.
I'd like to see pictures of that vest that you showed me that you were wearing.
But I got pictures of me being in a rubber raft at the front of it, crossing the Euphrates River.
Wow.
With my weapon out, you know. That's pretty cool. But anyway, so I spent time in Iraq, in Mosul, which is north of Baghdad. I spent time in Ramadi, which was west of Baghdad. I spent time at Baghdad. I spent time in Sulaymaniyah, way up north. I got pictures there of the young Peshmerga guys. They were like my personal bodyguards, like 5 or 6 of them with their AK-47s. Pretty cool. I'll find those pictures. And then I would go on 90-day deployments, and they didn't want us to stay longer without a break because of the stress of the job. So I'd come home for 30 or 45 days, then go back for 90 days, decompress, I guess. And we didn't lose any guys while I was there. We did lose one of the guys that was with me at Ramadi. He was a former Atlanta narcotics officer. And if you saw the movie Zero Dark 30, did you see it?
I don't think so.
There's a scene in there where the main female star's female friend, they were both CIA employees. Well, she had transferred to Afghanistan from Iraq, and she had gotten a local mullah, religious figure, or so she thought, to cooperate and provide information. And he came on base in Afghanistan. And it's in the movie. He was not searched. And they said, did you search this guy? No, we gotta search him. So he puts up a big fuss. No, it's an insult, to Allah and all.
Right.
Bullshit they do. Anyway, seconds later he detonated an explosive vest he had on. Anyway, he killed that friend of mine that had been an Atlanta Police Department officer. his name. That's terrible like that. I remember he was a big biker like I was. And when I went to Sturgis, I brought back a t-shirt for him and gave it to him. He really appreciated it.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me about his girlfriend. She's a hairdresser, and they're going to get married. You know, and now he's dead, you know.
Yeah.
Because this girl insisted he not be searched. When I was in Iraq doing stuff, they tried to pull that stuff with us. And we told them, it ain't happening.
Well.
Nobody comes on this installation unless they've been searched.
Right.
And that's why, because look what happened.
Oh, sure.
I think they killed, that explosion killed 5 or 6 CIA people. It's in the movie Zero Dark 30.
Okay. I'll have to, Dark 30? Okay.
Zero Dark 30.
Zero Dark.
It's about the killing of Bin Laden.
Okay.
The SEAL team going in.
Okay.
But that's really just like the grand finale. Most of the movie is about this CIA female intelligence analyst putting bits of information together to try to track down where he is.
Right.
Because remember, we didn't know where he was for the longest time. But anyway, that poor guy lost his life.
Wow.
So then I got an offer to go to work for a company where I would wear an army uniform, carry an army weapon, and be assigned to an army unit and live in their quarters and everything. So I did a year of that in Iraq and a year in Afghanistan. And so it was a pretty good concept. The concept was we want to convert from a wartime environment to a rule of law environment. This is the Army Military Command,
right,
saying the State Department. So we need ex-law enforcement to be subject matter experts.
Sure.
So we develop programs over there. Biometrics. We had soldiers, when they're on patrols, if they saw any MAMs, military-age males, meaning 17 to 35, stop them, do a buccal swab, and get their DNA entered.
Right.
Because we were getting a lot of DNA evidence off of bomb sites. The knuckleheads, that's what I call them. They set their bombs, smoking cigarettes, throw it off on the side.
Right.
Or pieces of the detonator, or the detonator we found in nearby, intact.
With their fingerprints.
Fingerprints and stuff. And even fluid from their sweat, maybe, whatever. But anyway, so we would have success in identifying the bomb makers.
Right.
And I don't know, just my personal experience, 90% of our fatalities and injuries are caused by IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Because, like I mentioned with my son, these guys don't want to face our soldiers. Man up. So we need to find a way to keep our soldiers safe from the IEDs.
Right.
So we would identify guys, and maybe initially, whatever, we could go out with certain troops to locate these guys. But then guys started getting killed and hurt. So the contractor said, you can't be going out playing soldier anymore.
Right.
So the SF guys would go out with just them. And they weren't always interested. Well, I'm just speaking opinions. It wasn't necessarily their mission to bring somebody back.
Right.
If you understand
Sure.
what I'm saying. their mission was keep that son of a gun from teaching other people how to make bombs.
Right. Whatever it takes, right?
Yeah. The only lives I cared about were my soldiers.
Right.
So, but while I was in Afghanistan, we had our first casualty, a guy named Paul Przetsko, I think. He and I were in the indoctrination class training in the States before we went over. I went to Iraq, he went to Afghanistan. My second tour, I went to Afghanistan. His second tour, he stayed in Afghanistan. He was killed.
Wow.
And while I was there, 2 or 3 more guys were killed. So, the handwriting's on the wall. I'm 62 now. My last tour there. And honestly, I probably was going to go back for a 3rd tour. I had a condo here in town and a house in Mansfield that I didn't know much on, either one of them. Mm-hmm. My plan was to pay them off and just give them to my sister and brother because, you know, I had a house down the street.
Right.
I'm not a Bill Gates or a Mark Cuban, but I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm not a Sammy Moore, but I'm okay. But anyway, but it certainly I started thinking about it, about going back, but I got the cancer in my throat.
Right.
So that was done. And maybe that's the Lord's way of telling me, well, since you're such a knucklehead and you won't listen to my messages, I'll give you one message that'll keep you from going back.
Right.
So, anyway, but, no, the Lord had been good to me. He protected me. I had a couple encounters over there. On one occasion in Iraq, while at Baghdad, I was walking out of my hooch, and I heard this thump in the ground, and rocks come flying over me, you know, gravel. And one of the guys, towel around his waist, came out of the hooch, looked at me, and said, "What was that?" I said, I think a rocket just came in, but it didn't detonate. And sure enough, the EOD guys came out,
right.
Explosive Ordnance Detachment guys, you know, the bomb expert guys. And they said, yeah, there's a rocket down here. And I said, oh, are you guys going to disarm it? He said, no, there's no sense. He said, if it went off, it'd be like a puff. You'd see a little puff of dust, that'd be it. But fortunately, a lot of the stuff that they used over there, 2 things. Number one, they rarely hit what they were aiming at. And number 2, oftentimes they were duds. So we had a joke, like, we hope they're aiming at us, because if they're aiming at us, we're going to be safe. I mean, these guys literally would have a target 2 kilometers away, straight ahead. But the rocket might hit 5 kilometers to the east. So, but anyway, so I did my tours, and I got to see my boy in Iraq a lot.
Yeah, that's good. You mentioned that before. Right?
And I made, you know, a lot of good friends. Some guys that I still see today. One was a retired sergeant major. I met him in Iraq, and we just went down to Cancun with our wives. And of course, a couple of the other guys, the colonel retired, and he's down at Fort Hood. Well, they call it something else now, Fort Cavazos or something, but it'll always be Fort Hood to me. And so I got that benefit out of it, and you know, and I remember when my boy went over the first time, you know, I prayed, said a prayer, and I said, Lord, I said, I ain't been around much lately, and I haven't talked much to you lately, but if you take care of my boy and bring him back to me safe, I'm yours for life, you know. And so that's the way it's been. I'm still not perfect in that regard, I don't talk to him as much as I should still, but I do regularly. But I got some of the guys at church say I should be talking to him every day. It's like I should be reading my book every day, and I try to, but I fall short sometimes. But still, I have a good relationship.
You do, and then I tell you, you've got a lease now that is your life partner now,
right.
And that's you're, I think, a very lucky man.
Oh yeah, I've got the sweetest girl I've ever known in my life. Is my wife,
right?
And she really is my best friend, and she makes me laugh, and she's got the cutest accent, and I just love her to death. You know, there was one other story. Oh, I wanted to tell, and then I'll shut up because I talk a lot. But I remember when I was doing the security for that government agency, reporting into Ramadi, we had a private little compound area, and there were 4 houses right on the river. And in those houses, you know, being a history major, I sometimes look at things from like a historical perspective.
Right.
So when I got there, I just stepped back and I looked at these little palaces for them. And each one would house 10 to 15 to 20 guys. And at the far left, we had a big dirt lot that we used as our firearms range. Well, the house next to the firearms range was a SEAL team. And actually, I believe Chris Kyle was there at the same time I was, because he was in Mosul.
Okay.
This would have been in 2006, early 2006. Anyway, so on the left, as I'm facing it, is a SEAL team. Back behind the palaces is a river. On the left is a SEAL team. Next is a Ranger platoon, Army Ranger platoon. Next is all of us gunslingers. That's what we were called, gunslingers. And then to the right was supposedly a Delta unit. So, and my guys, we weren't active duty. We're all contractors. But they were guys like me. I'm ex-Army Ranger Special Forces guy. All the guys there were either ex-Navy SEALs, ex-Rangers, and ex-SF guys.
Wow.
And so I looked at this and I thought, you know what? This is the #1 draft. Everybody in here is a #1 draft.
Right.
I mean, the talent that was there. These were the Rambos of the Rambos.
Wow.
You know, and so that's why I say, kind of in closing, I look back on my life and, you know, I'm obviously very proud of it. And I sound like I'm bragging, and I don't want to brag, but it was a hell of a ride for me. And, you know, I'm a 19-year-old kid standing in an airplane, 4,000 feet over the jungle at 3 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the jump master to say go. And he says go, and I jump out into the darkness. That's all I see. How many guys can say they did that stuff?
Right.
How many guys can say they hung at the end of a rope, dangling under a helicopter, flying around the ocean at 4,000 feet?
Right.
How many guys can say they got locked up with gangsters in a jail cell?
I think you've had quite a ride. So
anyway, but it's been nice talking to you, Sammy.
Cal, thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
You're my friend and my neighbor, and what else can I say? You're just...
We're good friends.
Good friends.
Dear friends, so, and I feel, at least I feel the same about you, Sam.
Good. I appreciate it.
Okay.